Hi friends, welcome back to Moments Peace. Today we are talking with my friend Beth, who's also been a mentor to me, and we're going to talk about what veteran homeschoolers would say to today's generation of homeschoolers. So stay tuned. Hey Beth, thank you so much for being here today. I would like to start with just letting everybody know a little bit about you and your experience, and even I'll let them know how you've mentored me and impact our homeschool.
Okay. All right. So I have 5 children that I homeschooled from the time that my oldest was 9 years old, then all the way through high school. Now they're all grown and graduated, and I am a retired homeschool mom. So my oldest is 38, then 36, 34, 30, and 25. So they're all doing great. And I have 2 little grandsons that are 4 years old and 9 months old, future homeschoolers. Mom and Dad are going to homeschool them too. Yay. And so I started homeschooling after hearing some radio programs back in the day, Dr. Dobson, and some of those things that were kind of the very first times people were starting to hear about homeschooling. So I wasn't on that front wave of homeschoolers, but kind of about another 10, 15 years back from when homeschooling started to kind of come into the...
a little bit more mainstream?
Yeah, there were more
90s?
People around. So it was 1994 was when I started. So yeah, where we had lived before here, I met one family in our town and kind of picked her brain for a little while, but then we moved here and there were a few more families, and at our church I met a family who was homeschooling and kind of got my foot in that way. Had to convince my husband that it wasn't a really crazy thing to do, because he thought it was at first. But once we decided to give it a shot and we could do it for a year and see how it worked, we were pretty much sold from that point on.
And so what made you want to homeschool?
So I am from a family of teachers. My parents are both public school teachers, and I thought I wanted to be a public school teacher, and they kind of talked me out of it. And so I took a lot of education classes in college. I really was interested in it, but didn't go through the whole student teaching and getting my certification. But again, I was interested in education. And when I don't think I was pregnant with my first child, I found a book at the library just by chance that was called Better Than School. And it piqued my interest, so I checked it out and read it, and it was about a family's experience homeschooling in New Hampshire, in the 1970s. And it was the first time I'd ever even heard of that as a possibility of something that people could do, and I was fascinated. Mm-hmm. And I just remember thinking I would like to do that, very family-centered. They were kind of unschoolers, how they approached life with just lots of experiences and things. And I wanted our family to be close. I wanted to be able to let my kids grow at their own pace, and I guess I'm always been a little bit of an out of the box thinker. So I liked the idea of being able to individualize their educations, personalize, add things, incorporate the things our family was interested in, travel, all those kinds of things. It just kind of really got me excited about the idea that, school can be more. Even though I loved school growing up, mm-hmm. I liked school. I was a good student. I liked going to school and doing schoolwork, but I don't think I was ever challenged in school. I don't think I was ever, there wasn't a lot about it that, probably helped me to grow to my potential. So those were the kinds of things I was thinking about, like, oh, what if it could be different?
Right.
You know, what if, and I, you know, again, I was like, oh, I could do this. I wasn't one of those like, oh, I could never homeschool.
Right.
I was like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah, the possibilities are opening.
This could be so fun, you know, because I'm kind of creative, and I like, you know, coming up with new ideas. I'm a very good idea person. I'm not a great detail person, but that has to come, you know.
Right.
I learned to be more organized and detailed,
right, especially
out of
with 5
necessity.
kids. Yes.
Right. But the ideas of it excited me.
Right.
So I just had to get my husband on board, who's a much more logical engineering kind of like, well, how is this going to work? I'm like, I don't know. Let's find out. You know?
Right.
So,
And so how long did it take to get him on board?
Probably, well, my oldest was 4th grade, so probably 4 years.
to get him.
Because I had dropped the idea early on. But again, where we were living, we moved here when my oldest was in 3rd grade. And where we lived before, there really weren't any homeschoolers around that we knew of. There was one family I met in our church who was homeschooling just their elementary kids. And then they would put them in school and middle school. And but as far as my husband was concerned, that's it. That was the only homeschool family he'd ever heard of.
Right.
And, you know, like, why would you want to be the only, like, he thought it would be isolating, and that, you know, there was nothing, like, how are these kids going to make friends? And, but then when we moved here, we found out there were a few more. There still weren't a lot. Tons,
yeah.
But there were a few families that we met who had kids around our kids' ages, and he saw that they were normal. Mm-hmm. And that they had, you know, things that they did with other people. And like,
so on the timeline, would you say this is the late 90s, early 2000s?
So this was early 90s.
Okay.
So my oldest was 9. So it was 1994.
Okay. That you landed here and you found
we landed here. So I had a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Okay.
So I started with a 4th grader and a 1st grader, and I had the 2 little ones hanging on, kind of just in the background. But we kept it simple at the beginning. I got some good advice to just kind of give myself a whole year of getting used to this new thing we were doing, that this was like my learning year.
Right.
And whatever the kids learned was going to be fine. Mm-hmm. And my mom, who was a public school teacher, was very encouraging.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Because sometimes that's a point of contention.
Yes.
So that's really neat.
And so even though she didn't live close by, we lived far away, but still just, she encouraged me. She thought I could do it, that the kids were going to be fine. And I told her many times that I think if she was in my generation, she might have been a homeschool mom too, you know, as a teacher. But I think she saw the benefits, and she was also seeing things in the school system that were concerning her. Right. Even back 30 years ago. Right. You know, things, and this is small town, you know, kind of, but she was seeing things just like, no, it's probably good that, you know, you can do this at home and avoid some of these other things that we're dealing with in the schools right now. So. Right. Yeah. That was a good.
So one of the things I think is interesting about your story with Mark not totally being on board is that then you guys like help fund or like found like the homeschool community that we're a part of with now over 300 families in the area. So why don't you talk about what led you guys to that? Because it was the sense of needing community, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think both of us have this tendency to, when we see something that we don't like or don't think it's done well or needs to be done, we're like, fine, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll do it. right. You know, so when we started homeschooling, and pretty much like a lot of families in our family, I was the one homeschooling. He was the one providing. Right. And he pretty much, like, he wasn't teaching classes or coming, he was supporting me as I homeschooled the kids. He was supporting of the idea. He was the principal if I needed backup, you know, discipline later more on flex. Or more, like talk to dad, you know, and he provided, he gave me the freedom to make the choices, and which I appreciated. And So we joined a support group in Raleigh because that was where all the support groups were, even though we lived out in Wake Forest. And there were a few families out here, so we could get together and go to the park or do something. But the other, like the bigger parent meetings and bigger events were all in Raleigh, with people coming from Cary and coming from, pretty much the whole area. So after 2 years being in that group, I just kept thinking there's got to be more homeschoolers out here, because it was already starting to grow. I mean, we had heard of people at certain churches. Oh, there's a group of homeschoolers at this church, or there's some people over here who, so I knew there were more people out here in this north side of Raleigh who are homeschooling. So it's like, how do we get them together? Because you have to realize this is all before internet, before cell phones, so literally, two friends of mine who were in this Raleigh support group but lived out here, and I started talking and decided we were going to see if we could get interest for a group of moms out here to start meeting. And so we literally made up flyers and stuck them on bulletin boards in the library and at the grocery store, and that's kind of, at a gas station or whatever, where people would be, and put our phone numbers on it and said, call us, and we're going to have a meeting, and got 20 families that were interested in starting a homeschool group.
And the intention was to be Christian homeschoolers coming together to support each other, and you kind of speaking life into them. A lot of discipleship, I think, took place in there.
Yeah. Now, at the beginning, I had only been homeschooling 2 years. Susan had been homeschooling 2 years. Holly had been homeschooling 3 years. So we were still new at it too. So the discipling was like cross-discipling, because there weren't veteran homeschoolers. There weren't
you had books
around
for that.
All of us. Right. There were books that you'd read of people who've been homeschooling a long time. And, so we were, at our very first meeting, I remember we put a big, I think it was a whiteboard, and we were made a list, like, what's our wish list of these 20 families? Like, what do you wish that there could be for homeschoolers to do, that you can't do just in your family. And we had things up there like, field trips, band, sports teams, science fair, those kinds of things that kids in school might be able to do. And we looked at the list and said, well, that's what maybe we can start working towards as a group of families. And, looking back a few years later, we had whittled through that list pretty well,
with your husband.
With my husband, and, he's a sports guy. That came a couple years later because, again, my kids were young. And, we played, they played t-ball in the town and town league and soccer and stuff with the kids in town. But the homeschool sports program kind of a few years later, when our kids started to get to middle school age, and they wanted to, and my kids were all athletes. They liked sports and basketball and baseball. And so it's like, well, there's going to have to, I guess we're going to have to
do
help start something here. And there was another mom, Jennifer Donahue, who that was actually her passion also. And she really got on fire to kick that off first. And she got that started in Lighthouse and some of the area. And Mark came in a little bit later to kind of carry that on and build it up. But the sports, the band, that within a year or two, we had a homeschool band just because a mom at her church happened to meet somebody, and in their conversation, he's like, well, I'm a music teacher at a local school and I'm a band director. And she's like, oh, what would you think about teaching homeschool kids? And he's like, oh, I would like, so it's just like kind of making connections in your community and saying, what would you think of doing that? And so they got a homeschool band started and, those kinds of things that it's what you had to do.
Right.
If you wanted something for your children, if you felt like, I really want this, well, you're going to have to do something to make it happen.
Right.
And find the resources. And that's how all the homeschool stuff came into being. So.
And that's the turn I want to take in our conversation, because there's been a drastic change. Mm-hmm. Some of it's been good, and some of it is a lot of the deep roots have been lost. Mm-hmm. Like, we get to ride on the coattails of everyone who fought for the laws for it to be legal, and parent rights, and how our states are mandated, and opportunities like this, and supports, and books, and made it more like normal. And then the internet came, and we had more information coming at us. And there's a heart that was behind homeschooling, I would say, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, definitely early 2000-ish. And then somewhere along that line, and I would say post 2020, another kind of turn has been taken. And so I want to kind of talk about that. And so what do you feel are the differences from today's generation of homeschoolers compared to those of the past?
Okay. Again, so since I'm a little bit out of the homeschool world, but I'm still connected online, sort of trying to be a mentor, and I still have friends who are homeschooling, and I'm still trying to keep my fingers in it. But some of the things that I see are, some of the changes came about with the internet, of course, and as the homeschooling community grew, we became a market. And so there was a lot more things being marketed to homeschoolers online and off. But so the opportunities grew, and the more opportunities there are, the, more choices. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing, because then people start becoming very, well, I just want to do this, and they stop being invested in creating community and just kind of being a shopper for the things they want for their family. And I think, there's a challenge there, because you're not as invested in the community and in being part of making things happen, because that's work. Right. It takes time, it takes effort to be a creator, to have to build things for your children and for your family, and to build a community. So, if somebody's already done that, then you get to just reap the benefits. But I think then there's less investment and less connection that's happened. Some of the things, there's also a lot more crossover, and sort of, it used to be like the homeschool community was definitely separate from public school, private school. It was like, there was no crossover. Right. And now there's more. Both with families who have kids in multiple kinds of schooling. There's, I think, more now. They might be homeschooling one child, have one child in public school, have, people in different kinds of places. Also, there are things happening where you can take certain things at a public school and then kind of do some of those things at the same time that you're homeschooling. There's online public school where you are a public school student, but you do your work at home online, which is sort of, again, kind of, are you homeschooling? No, I mean, what does that really mean? What's the definition? Are you just doing school at home, or is it? So those lines have blurred a lot, which is,
which changes the atmosphere.
It does change the atmosphere, and it changes, because when you're talking, you don't have the same responsibility or the same maybe motivation as a parent when you're taking on the responsibility of providing the curriculum, choosing the curriculum, instructing or finding instructors versus, and not even public schools. There's a lot of online private schools like Liberty University Academy, or different things that people are using. There's a lot more people wanting a sort of full online school, right? Everything's provided for me. They'll even do the grades and the record keeping, and I just have to write the check and, make sure my kids, maybe have turned in all their stuff.
Right.
But, it's more of a supervisor than, so it's definitely changed the atmosphere in the homeschool community. I think choices are great. I do think that there's, you're giving up things that you don't know, maybe that you're missing out on by making those kind of choices. More parents are working and homeschooling. And I think there's always been working parents who homeschooled, but I think parents in the old days, because you had to actually be more hands-on, their work, they had to have a flexible work environment where they, their hours weren't during school time.
Right.
Or
and those
whatever.
school hours were almost even more protected.
Right.
So I know a lot of people probably think this is weird, but I am an old soul and I became a parent in the early 2000s, and all my mentors were older, and I was reading all the older books. And then I have deep biblical worldview and conviction. So I often say, like, when people ask me that question, because I am still friends with a lot of older homeschoolers, and I see these younger ones and I kind of feel stuck in the middle, and it's kind of weird. But I feel most at home with the older moms because we have the same mentality. And we were at a graduation recently back in the spring, and somebody asked me, well, what do you think is wrong? Which is where I came up with this idea for this podcast, because I was like, I have to have this conversation. And I was like, well, I think this generation lacks conviction. They lack, and that's not to say like blanket it for everyone, because obviously there's some out there, but the idea of homeschooling, not just for convenience or, and rightly so, a lot of parents are scared about what's going on in the public school, whether they're, mentally messing with their kids, physical, or, just even, mass shootings is a real deal. Like, there's so many reasons why people homeschool. But the idea of optimizing our time with our children for the heart of discipleship, like a relationship, is what's missing. So they will farm their kids off a lot to an online, which there's nothing wrong with that, but they'll push them off to that, or they're running them here, there, and everywhere, and you lose family culture. And
I call it vision. They lack a vision, right, for what it could be, and for, like you said, a family culture, for family, for something that's different and better, than what they've left behind. Instead of trying to recreate what they've left behind, and again, there's so many reasons that people leave their school system, private or public. There's lots of reasons, and so that goes into it. But and we're much more diverse. Right. So the diversity in the homeschool community has increased tremendously in the last 30 years. Where in this area, especially, it was primarily Christians, who were homeschooling, and that was just. That was just what it was.
Like, oh, okay, white man, lots of kids, Christian homeschools.
Right. It was just what it is, because this is the Bible Belt, and churches are everywhere. But it was just primarily a Christian community, and now it's much more diverse as far as there's a lot of secular groups. There's a lot, Muslims and just different religious convictions, different ethnic groups, different economic groups. Much more diverse, so that it's harder to have a common, find that common ground. And, part of the thing, I think sometimes people look at families who have homeschooled before or who are older and who've seen those kids and like, oh, I want what I see there. I see this family, these kids that are great people, and I'll homeschool too, but they don't want to
do the work
that we did. And not just say there's not more than one way to do it, but it does take
You have to roll
there's
up
a
your
certain
sleeves
way.
and have a sense of commitment
Yeah,
to it.
there's
to
a certain
commitment.
reason of being countercultural, right?
Yes.
Doing things in a different way to get a different outcome.
Exactly.
So
Yes.
if you don't want to do it a different way, then you're not going to expect things are going to have a different outcome, really.
Exactly. And that's what I love, because I didn't get to mention earlier, but, you know, one of the ways that you've really, you know, I guess I started kind of like sitting under you guys in Lighthouse and stuff like that, like 2011 or so.
Okay.
So I had like upper elementary and then down. And one thing that I love, because I was very like hesitant, because I'm like, you know, I want to join this group, but I want them to not be weird. Like, you know, like, do they line up with my vision? And having a vision and having a mission statement of what you want, I think keeps you committed to homeschooling and keeps you like in the game. And then I meet people like Jennifer Donahue, who I'm like, I want to be like her when I grow up, you know, and I see you and I'm just like, okay. So one of the ways you've directly impacted me was ironically, I'm definitely much more of an introvert, right? And one of the, I don't even know if you remember this, but a long time ago, you talked about what it's like to have extroverted kids when you're an introverted mom. And you had said, and there's panels of moms. And then when it came to middle school and high school and having to grade and all this, like, you know, you did a training boot camp. And I was like, trying to follow the other mom, and then you came up there and you were like, this is how we grade, and I'm like, that's it. That's me.
Right?
Like,
that was me and Kelly, right?
And yes, and then I'm like,
two different ways.
Yes, chemist, and then like, I'm like, I want
you
the
could do it that way, or
yes, and I like totally loved it, and that's how I grade my kids. And you know, I'm like, so I call it the BETH method, like, and that's how I've told like other people, my kids know, you know, if you got to see, you know, there's nothing really else. Like, you either get it or you don't, you know? So there's that. And then your love for geography and bringing it to life, and like the food, and just, you know, throwing in like the missions, like it being real. Like, there's so many ways in which you have personally impacted me and in our homeschool. But in Lighthouse, we created so many memories, you know, whether it was Christmas caroling or camping. Like, there were so many different things that were going on, because so many parents were like, I'm interested in this, so I'm going to pour this out and offer it to others, with the hopes of somebody was going to come and, you know, fill our bucket back up.
And partly, I think a lot of our emphasis in the early years especially was making memories for our families, not just for individual kids.
Yes.
You know, I mean, there were some things, you know, as our kids got older, that, okay, this is geared toward high schoolers, this is geared toward elementary schoolers. But overall, it was always like most of our efforts were things for our families to do. And, you know, keeping
that unit and caring about that. And it was family memories. I realized that looking back in a yearbook, you know, and just the idea of having a yearbook, I was like, these are our family. Like, this was our verse for the year, and this is what life was like. And it's kind of sad, because and then the devotions, like, it was actual like Bible devotions, and it was moms speaking from their hearts of their struggles, their encouragement, and just feeling so refueled, and having a sense even of community by having a regular meeting place, and being able to I mean, I'm not like, oh, sign me up for a women's retreat. Like, I'm not that type of mom or woman. I'm more like always on the fringes. Like, you know, I'm like, I don't want to share a room with anybody, you know, like, but Lighthouse like brought me out of my shell in a lot of ways, of like, when I knew those Tuesday nights, and it was like, and it was so doable, like, and it was predictable, like the first Tuesday where this is a place we're leaving, and then afterwards there was like an after party, and then it was like, oh, I became a mom who was willing to stay out, you know. And
how many nights we stood in the parking lot for like hours.
And then it was like, oh, McDonald's the only place open, and like, even though most of us wouldn't even eat it, like everybody went there just to hear like, oh, I'm not alone, like, okay, so you eat chocolate in your garage behind your kids back too, like, you know. And it's like from stuff like that to just, you know, my husband may be struggling here, or job loss, or cancer, or aging parents, and then how do I still homeschool, you know. And it dispelled a lot of fear that the enemy likes to get when you do feel isolated. And the word of God was never like quenched, and it was almost like the standard, especially when we like prayed about stuff, and stuff was laid out for the year of what to expect. And then I became a leader, and really enjoyed a lot of the different things that I got to do and create those memories for my kids. But now, one of the things we struggled at towards the end of that kind of error was like mentorship. We offered it. We wanted it. We wanted to help people apprentice to take over and help them kind of understand, like, guys, you know, well, and one thing was Jennifer Donahue one time said is sometimes I feel sorry for you guys because you have so many choices and so many decisions that now you'll have decision fatigue. And, you know, you don't know what to choose. So without that conviction and vision of like what's unique to our family, what is Christ calling us to right now, and how do I like match up with those things that align with us? Because so oftentimes people will overschedule themselves or join something and then not be faithful to something because they were just going with it and trying, but it wasn't really aligning with what they really realized they were able to do. There's a
saying, something about sometimes too much of the good takes the place of the best. You know, I mean, all these good things, these are all great fun activities or good things, but when you say yes to one thing, you're having to say no to something else, and the no might be to something that was better, right? Or could, you know, the best that God had for us, and because you're filled up, well,
you can't.
There's no margin, right? There's no margin,
and margin is a great word to use because there is none of that. Like we used to make time for making sure we had time for family time and family nights and getting together and fellowshipping. You know, Friday fellowships. You know, it's like was a thing, and there's just so much of the family dynamic and discipleship and, you know, the old school mentality of maximizing your time and using homeschool as a tool to reach the heart of your kids. And now everybody wants the heart of their children and they want their hearts to turn to their children, but it's almost like either they don't know how or they just not willing to put in the work. And we also have a mentorship problem where we have this experience, right? All of your kids, most of them have gone to college, they've been on the mission field, they've been in the military, very successful children. Parents now, so successful that their memories, they're passing that out and they want to homeschool their children, you know, and they're going to do it based on what you've poured into them. So, you know, they're going to have some of that old school stuff. And we live in a society, and I think in this homeschool current movement where, you know, the foundation was laid and we had so many blessings, not just legally, but we have the test scores now. We know we can get into college. They want our children in colleges. And so it's almost like this generation doesn't have to prove anything, but that's exactly what they're doing. It's like they live their lives to prove, like, you know, and maybe it's from a state of fear. Maybe it's not, where I feel like the veteran homeschoolers were like, I'm doing this because God told me to do it and this is my mission. Where in this generation, I feel they're like, I want to do this and I'm going to sign up for every single thing I possibly can, or it's almost like I have to prove to the mother-in-law, or I have to prove to social media, or I have to, you know, they're so scared almost of failure that just sitting down and reading the Bible is not enough. You know, where there were times where I know veteran homeschoolers that were, you know, if my kids saw that there was a prayer request that came in, we would stop and we would pray and we would get on our knees. You know, if there was a need that needed to be met, we made a meal, and that was okay for it to be school for that, the portion of our school, to make that meal, to pack it up and show hospitality and take it over there, you know, and spend the time and the gas and I
remember saying that to my kids, like, oh, we have a God appointment today.
Like
we're changing our schedule because our friends need something, like everybody's sick, we're going to go make chicken soup and we're going to bring it over to the, you know, whatever. So those were things that sort of listening to the Spirit and not being worried about checking off all the boxes. But that's just something, I mean, even when I started, it was something I had to deliberately choose, you know, that because there was still that opportunity, like I'm going to be a box checker or I'm going to be flexible, right? And, you know, incorporate much more than just checking off the, you know, that we did reading, spelling, math, science, and history. Good, school's done. Right. You know, I mean, that was just a philosophy that I think I was built into me from the beginning. That I always like, every day is a learning day, whether we open a book or not, whether we fill out a worksheet or not. You know, you're learning something. You're learning, you know, and the things. Education is more than academics. Right. So I think that's kind of was my philosophy that I
Right. And then that's something that I think the
people.
Veterans did too. They were like, academics are absolutely important. But you maximize your time because you're more like tutoring it. So you don't need, all these, especially in the younger age. And then when you get in the older age, yes, you need to protect your school time, but it is okay to say, we're going to make this meal for someone, or we'll carve out this time, because it's almost like we live in extremes where it's like we're just always out, we're always doing this stuff, and then our house are neglected, and then some moms feel shameful that they're not good housekeepers. You know what I mean? And there's laundry and pile, and then they can't even have anybody stop by. Like if the rapture happens with somebody coming by, it's like the worst thing ever, because our house are never welcomed or and then and then you swing to the other side where all you're doing is like being at home and then not. So you do have to find that healthy balance between checking the boxes and getting academics done, but being free enough and having the heart at least to be like, I'm not going to compact everything, or my kids' sports schedule fill up everything that we don't have time for getting around the table for God's word to pray and to read and to conversate with each other, which we know statistically so many, teen pregnancy, drugs, gang, all that stuff is so much more reduced when that's happening. So when we're eating out 4 or 5 times a week and we're not connecting, like what was the point of your homeschool, if you're constantly out during the day because your kids are at classes everywhere, and then you're out everywhere for this, and then there's not really any like balance, and it's like, what are you trying to prove, or what are you afraid of? Because there's kids learning Latin in kindergarten and second, like, is that bad? No. But is it totally necessary?
Yeah.
Those are kind of the things that I find, like, they're so terrified and they want everything, and it's like, well, the Lord, you can have so much confidence when he doesn't want you to fear in what you're doing.
I mean, I think having less choices and having to, again, because of when we started homeschooling, I spent so much time on my knees, because I was, I had to trust God that this thing he'd called us to, because I really did feel it was something he was calling me to. I just felt that being drawn to this. Again, it just fit kind of my personality, but also I felt it was something, but I was a fairly new Christian. I didn't ever feel like I knew enough about God. I always felt like I was not going to do a good job of teaching my children about God because I didn't know enough. I was new at the Bible and new at all these things. And it took me a while to realize that it didn't matter how much I knew about God. It was the fact that I was pursuing God, that my children were
they're seeing.
That's what they're seeing, right?
Yes.
That's the legacy, that they see you either pursuing God or running away from God. They see you trusting God or trusting yourself in the world. They see you, believing the word of God or disregarding it. Those are the things that it doesn't matter if you're a new Christian or if you've been in church all your life or how much you know. It's sort of the example of you living as a Christian. And I don't really know the answer to these questions in these Bible study lesson that we're trying to do. So I'm going to have to figure that out too. Let's look it up, or let's go find something we can listen to that'll tell us more, or, being a learner with my kids, even in that area, of faith was,
and that was
where I
something
was.
You always said at the meetings and everything like that. It's like you learn with your kids. It's okay to learn with your kids and not have all the answers. And you were always a very strong advocate of like worldview conferences and supporting the local homeschool conventions and stuff like that had those sessions. And I find that very important and encouraging, because that when you don't have the answers, just going to convention can make you feel like you're not alone. And you're getting answers and you're getting that comfort and stuff. And that's something that I am surprised that a lot of homeschoolers have never been to a convention, and that's kind of crazy. Because it's an investment. I think you always say it's investment in yourself and in your homeschool when you take the time to do it.
I just always felt that was, part of I considered homeschooling my children to be my career. I mean, that's what I was devoting myself to. Right. I have a college education. I'm not out in the workforce. But this is my career. It doesn't matter if I have a college education, but that's, I'm just saying I chose that to pour myself into raising my children. And I just felt that, okay, whatever I can do to make myself a better equipped teacher, better to have more ideas or, inspiration or whatever. So going to the conferences, listening to speakers, reading the books, that just all kind of helped build, because some of the things was like, oh, I really like this. I can incorporate part of this. Oh, this really doesn't fit with how I do school. So no, that's not going to be something that I'm going to use. But I could weed through the information and take what fit and leave behind the things that didn't fit. And it made me a better, more confident, gave me ideas that I might not have come up with on my own, that like, oh, that's something I'd like to try, you know? And then it was like, oh, I'm really glad that I heard that, or, and then as my kids got older, when I brought them specifically the homeschool conference where they had the teen track with the worldview speakers, but we'd find other places too sometimes. But that was part of their curriculum,
Part of their education.
Here's a someone with knowledge speaking on a subject I don't know a lot about, and so we're going to go and glean from that. This is something, whether it was a speaker or, when we traveled, we'd always take advantage of, going and listening to rangers, at the national parks, because they had the information and, we wanted to learn from them. And it's kind of what I said, my philosophy, every place we went, because we were kind of known in our family, if we were going to go someplace with family members, Beth's going to stop and read all the signs. We're going to listen to this guy talk. Okay. So, we can't just run through the zoo. We're just going to study the zoo.
Right.
But
I mean, that is one of the things that I think is unique to homeschooling that I wish more people in this generation would be more open to, is that when you kind of slow down to take that time, then your kids become more relational. So they're coming to you, they're talking with you, they're asking you the questions. I remember you saying one time at a meeting, when your kids become teenagers, you forget sleep. like the night. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You were like,
it's
for some reason,
late at
something
night.
happens. And you're like, you're so
11.
tired. Yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, the whole time, I could tell Mike, every time, I'm like, Mike, Beth totally warned me about this. This is so true. And it's like something happens to them where their mind's just like, hey, Mom, what about this? What about this? What about this?
Everything.
And they're processing everything relationally, academically, and even like a lot theologically. And if you're not available, I mean, sometimes it happens when you're prepping dinner, and stuff
or riding
like that.
In the car or whatever.
Yeah.
But you have to be available.
Yes. I love that you say that. You have to be available. So some of the things that I think that you just shared is amazing, because we have to look at it as a full-time job, a career. It's our mission. I love how in John chapter 17, Jesus says, I've completed the work you've wanted me to do. I accomplished it. And it's like, you're on this side of it, and you could be like, I faithfully co-heired with Christ to do what I had to do for my 5 kids. They're graduated, some were married, they're in careers. And it's like, you don't have to look back with sorrow and regret that did you really do your best, because you just confessed you spent that time on your knees. You spent that time growing with your kids and pouring into your homeschool and pouring into them. And you have to be available. And I think that when we're running, going, don't you think that changes the dynamic of the family spiritually, overall?
Yeah. Is when you asked, in the questions earlier about if I would change anything, if I could go back and do it over. And in the details, there's little things maybe. I might not have used that curriculum for as long as I did because it really wasn't a good fit. I switched earlier. It's little things, but overall, I have no regrets. Overall, I can look back and say, I would do it all over again. I'm glad that I jumped in. I'm glad with the way that I approached homeschooling. I would still do that again. I'd still be an eclectic homeschooler if I was going to go all over again. If I'd still, prioritize family time. Like when we did a lot of activities, and I know families have very different thresholds for the amount of activity they tolerate well.
Right.
So one family, you might look at my family and go, you guys are out all the time. And it didn't feel like that much, but we tended to all be out. Mm-hmm. And if somebody so a couple of my kids were in band. Well, we all went, mm-hmm. and the rest of the ones who weren't, they were too young or whatever, we were in the car, listening to audiobooks or playing outside, with the other kids around. But we were kind of, the whole family was there. My kids who played sports, we were all there cheering them on. Right. Band concerts, everybody's there. Piano recitals, everybody's there. Church, we're all sitting together. And so we kind of prioritized our family being there for each other. And, at the older they got, the kids started having their own individual things. Once they could drive, they maybe were, going to things, but we still prioritized being a family and supporting each other and expecting that of our kids. Right. Right. Your brother has something, you're going to come and support him. Right. That's kind of what we do in this family. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of things like other families might not be doing that. This is our family. This is how we do things. Right. And so and I think that was the right call for us. I'm glad we did it that way. I look at my kids now. They're great friends. Yes. They hang out together sometimes without me. It's like, why didn't you call me? I would come hang out too. Right. But, they, even the ones who live far away, we're all on a family group text. There's stuff going back and forth all day long, multiple times. We're still a very close-knit family, which those are the seeds so that happy, you planted, and now you're reaping that harvest. Yeah. And that is just a reward of your testament to keep staying steadfast and having that vision you talked about and executing it. And now you've got this fruit. Because I will see so many people that will say like, oh, but your kid really knows the Bible, or your kid really, like, you guys love each other so well. Like, how did that happen? And, it's really like, well, what labor did they like toil with to get, now they sowed those seeds and now they're reaping that. It's not just by chance, typically, right? Things don't just happen that way. Exactly. Yeah. And because I was terrified to become a mom, which I think is hilarious that the Lord's like, here's 6, right? It's like, right? Because I didn't have the best relationship. I come from a broken home. I didn't have the best relationship with my family. I was terrified, like, divorce terrified me because I was the kid of it and the oldest at that, and so I was like, ooh, I don't know. And then having to trust God with, my heart, giving it to a man, and then, having children, and then like, oh, now homeschooling and discipleship, and that's what that is. Okay. It's all super scary, and I would always be like, well, what if I have a messed up relationship? Like, and I don't want that. And so out of fear, I would be like, oh, I don't want to, have God's design for a plan, for a family. Mm-hmm. And the Lord totally like ripped those strongholds and put people in my life like you. And then I see examples of others, even people who with a more public, platform, like certain pastors or, like Ken Ham's kids, like they all walk with, like something like that. And it's like, okay, well, it's what seeds that they plant. And then it really goes back to that family culture and standing on the word of God and like pursuing, like you just said, pursuing Christ. And I think, when you sow a seed, you're going to reap that harvest. And it is beautiful to be on this side. You're 4 or 5 years retired from? Let's see, 6 years. Yeah. Okay. 6 years. I knew it was a bit, because then you did do art class for us. With that. I did some stuff after still, but Jason graduated 6 years ago. Yeah, which is crazy to think that. But so he's graduated, and he's been off and gone, and now you've had. But now, like you said, they all came for Thanksgiving, and they're hanging out with each other, and it's like, what a legacy, what a blessing. That was your heart in the beginning of it. I'm very thankful that's because I also know, and I have to tell people, there's no guarantee. Right. Like, we don't homeschool because we are guaranteed a certain result. Amen. Like, if you do this, your family will be like this. Mm-hmm. Your kids will all be, they'll all follow the Lord. They'll all love each other. That, there's no guarantee in anything. Right. We homeschool out of obedience. Like, if we feel that God's calling us to, then we're obedient. And the results we have to leave to Him. Yes. And I have one of my children's not walking with the Lord. and but we're still close. You know, the family's still close. We're still in relationship, and I'm still praying that he will return to the professions he made when he was younger. Right. He's taken a path that it's not bad. He's just not walking. He's not in church. He's not, walking with the Lord. So, but he's not in rebellion against us.
Right.
And I just feel that that's,
and you still have influence.
Yes. And I just feel that God tells us that we just have to trust him with his timing. And, there's verses that I hold on to that are promises that I claim, but I know that it's God's work, not mine. Right. None of us can save our children. We can't guarantee, we can't drag them into a relationship with God. That's, but we do plant those seeds. We do lead by example. We build relationship. We love them. And
they still have a great relationship with their siblings, know, and you guys. Yeah. And that is so important because, I love that you said that, like, homeschooling is not the salvation. I keep saying the word tool because it really is just a tool to help maximize your influence and give you that relationship. And, when you feel like you can say, like, I faithfully quote air. I did my part, and I am going to hear, well done, my good and faithful servant. But at this side of it, your mom heart aches because you're one child. It's like the one child, and you're calling them back and you're praying for them to come back. But it's like, your trust is where it belongs, and that is in the Lord, because it's not homeschooling but Jesus that saves. And we have to remember that, because we can't take the credit when our kids are all saved and
right. And that's what it's exactly right. It's like, it's not because I did X, Y, and Z. It's just, I did these things because that's what I felt was the best thing for my family, what God was calling us to do, but not because. It's not like I will love you, God, if you do this for me.
Right.
That's not right. I will homeschool if you do this for me. That's not, that's not why we have a relationship with God.
And we just got to leave our hands open to that, and that I do love that, because there are so many parents that do still homeschool out of fear, and it's like, I don't want to mess my kid up, or they're overbearing, or maybe not prepare their kids enough for this culture. And it's like, but at the end of the day, we got to remember it's the Lord's hand that saves, and it's not, it's all grace. It's not us. All we can do is be faithful to what God's called us to do, and then we don't have to live with the guilt if we know that we have faithfully sowed the seeds we were supposed to sow.
Yeah. And if we're feeling, and our pastor was just talking about this, or he's mentioned it several times recently, about, whose voice are you hearing? And if it's causing you grief, if it's causing you worry, if it's causing you anxiety, if it's causing you shame, it's not the shepherd. That's not who's speaking in your ear.
Right.
And that anxiety, that's so you have to identify where those thoughts are coming from, and turn, like, the Lord will give you peace. The Lord will give you assurance.
Yeah.
He'll give you, those things that he'll uplift. And even if things aren't going well, you've got hope, right? So I have hope for the future for all my children.
Amen.
And
he's the God
I say,
yes.
Satan does not have a foothold, right?
Amen.
I'm not going to let him take a foothold by giving in to fear and anxiety.
Right.
And I think that's, would be what my hope for all homeschool parents is, to be able to not operate from that place of fear and anxiety.
Right. Or that their salvation and work of God, like, is totally up to you,
Yeah.
Or even the idea, which I know as a veteran homeschooler, this, the idea of, like, I got to teach them everything.
Yeah.
I got to do all the things so they don't miss out. And it's like, no, everybody has gaps.
Yeah.
And the Lord is so faithful to fill in those gaps. Yeah. He redeems the time, so if you have a time where you had cancer, or you're sick, or you're taking care of an elderly parent, or your child's ill, or like us, we were displaced for months after mold and all that.
Right.
The Lord, I don't know how my kids did so well on the CAT test this year. I'm like, we were homeless, with mold and all that. And the Lord is just still so faithful. And your kids are learning every day through all those circumstances, and, if they can read, that's the biggest thing.
You're giving tools.
Yes.
You're giving your children the tools, and then you're providing them opportunities. But again, if they can read, if they, have a basic ability to research and to find the information, they can learn anything they need when they need it.
Right.
So you don't have to worry that, I forgot to teach them about the Spanish-American War. Gosh, they have this big hole right in the middle of their education. Or, if we didn't get to calculus, well, he can still learn calculus later.
Yeah.
Go take a class.
Yep.
We didn't do it in high school. Nope, because I'm not the math person.
Right.
So, and my husband is, but he was too busy at the time. So, it would have been nice, but that's not what we had. You can still learn that whenever you want.
Right.
You can learn anything you want whenever you want. You have the tools to learn.
And that's
and it's not all on me.
Yes.
I'm not like pouring all that information into you. We lay a foundation. Right. And we choose, and as homeschool parents, we can follow a curriculum. We can take that curriculum and say, I like this part, don't like that part. So, we give them the information that are the types of things that are going to lay a foundation for now learning for the rest of your life.
Right.
I'm always learning.
Yeah.
Right. You're learning. Right.
Yeah.
So it's just part of what living is. And so, if we've given our kids those good tools, and then also a firm foundation of character, of having security and the love of a family, just helping them to have some tools to navigate kind of a crazy world.
Right. Because that's something, like you said, the love of a family, the fact that your kids, no matter where they're at, know that they can come back home and that they're loved and accepted. That is the life-giving home.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I have kids, my kids are in their 30s, it might be in between jobs. And, I say it's anxiety, but you're never going to be homeless.
Right. Yeah.
You're never going to be living on the street.
Right.
Because if things got that bad, you have a bed here until you can get on your feet and go out again. I mean, that's always.
Right.
And if it wasn't, if Dad and I are gone, any of your siblings, you'd have a bed.
Right.
So you've got a sort of that safety net.
Yeah. You're
never
family.
going to be on your own.
Yep. So the gift of homeschooling and parenting, it was very intertwined, and sometimes now I would say this generation sees it very separate. And you brought up character. Christian character is almost overlooked now, and etiquette. And we have a lot of the older ones that complain about the younger generation's parenting and how we have a mutual friend who loves to mock the new generation. They want to talk everything out, and it's like, there's all this talking, but, sometimes they just need to just discipline. But in some sense, she is right in the sense that we need to teach etiquette and have good basic good manners and common sense again, and then there's the new generation. I do think that not being so, what's it, like a I don't know, like
the assertive,
kind of
the
like
parenting of dominating,
or helicopter mama or whatever they call it now, or that authoritarian kind of look. Right. So I am guilty of talking with my kids and stuff like that a little bit more, but so I'm guilty of that. So I think there's pros and cons in both styles, but we do have a generation that is a little bit more rebellious. And do you feel that this generation and the movement within homeschooling, now this generation sees character training and parenting completely separate than their academics, or do you think that there is still people who intertwine the both?
I mean, I know there are people who are still doing that. I know them. Some and it probably depends on your upbringing and the circles that you're running in, how much you depend on social media to influence your decisions, or what's popular versus what's not popular. yeah, I don't know. It's hard to really judge that from, I don't have a big, overview of younger moms right now. I sort of have like my daughter-in-law, my kids, their friends. And I do see them taking character as a serious part of how they're raising their little ones, to say please and thank you. And there is a lot more talking through things, choices. Would you like a peanut butter sandwich? Would you like a turkey sandwich? Or would you like something else?
Right. And the older generation is like, this is
what,
dinner.
Yeah, this is what I made. You can go hungry or you can eat this, right?
Right.
It's a little more, and it's like, and so I give like, okay, it's just a different way. I'm not going to say I was right or it is, I don't see it's a bad thing. It's not the way we did things. I did things different than the way my grandmother did things, so, but, character and, like you said, kind of common courtesy, are things that are taught, and that you're right that everybody's not taking that as a value necessarily. It seems old-fashioned or whatever, but we also see what happens when there's a lack of those things in society. Right. I think it's a lot less civil, and a lot of people can't even disagree without coming to blows. Right. That's part of the loss of the ability to dialogue and respect people, and that's what we want, hopefully, to teach our children. Right. And you have to train them. You have to demonstrate. Be an example of those things.
Everybody loves that Proverbs 22:6, like train up the child, and it's like, let's just camp out on train. You know what it takes to train someone over and over
right?
again.
Repetition.
It's like there's so much work just in that.
Yeah.
So you said you wouldn't change anything, which is really encouraging to hear, both as a mom or as a homeschool teacher. So what warnings or wisdom would you give moms in the middle of all the crazy about caring about and nurturing a home today with so many outside commitments and priorities? How would you?
So the one thing that I would change, if I could go back, was to pay more attention to my marriage. It was one of those things that, we've always been fine. Everything's fine. But with 5 kids and homeschooling and lots of activities, again, sports and music and, camp and prom and things that we've got involved in. I mean, Mark and I, for a while, we were going along each in our own lane, kind of.
Which is kind of easy to do.
Dividing and conquering. Okay, you get these 3, I got these 2. I've taken this one, you go this way. You take care of this, I'll take care of this. I do the homeschooling, you do the, and I read a book by Heidi St. John.
Yes, I love her.
Yeah, the busy busy homeschool mom's guide to romance was a book, and I don't remember how many years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. I wish I had it earlier, but she talked about running on parallel lines, being in your own lane too. But she said, the longer you do that, those lines tend to start moving away from each other.
Yes.
And instead of, if you're never doing this, if you're never intersecting, having time together as a couple, being deliberate about caring for your relationship outside of the parenting part, that you start doing this because you're never coming back together. And I think that's kind of what was happening with us. And then we got to a point when my kids were almost grown, and just realizing that we were very emotionally distant, and realized that we had to do some work. And it took some work.
Life is work.
Get us back. Gosh. And I was like, no. But yeah, it took some work. And I wish that I had, in hindsight's 2020, right? Looking back, that we had taken more time for ourselves as a couple.
Like in practical ways to purposely connect.
Yeah,
emotionally.
to purposely connect, to not just go out and talk about the kids, to talk, and now I'm married to, I don't like talking about my feelings kind of guy, right? Like, don't make me talk about my feelings.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not a big talker, but I definitely have more feelings and more words. Like you'll like go talk to your girls, get all those words out, kind of thing. But but I think even like a weekend away where we maybe even have an agenda, but or marriage. That we never did like the marriage weekends or anything of those, but I do think those would have been helpful. I think
kind of like investing in the homeschool convention, doing that for your marriage.
Yeah. It felt like, oh, we're fine. We don't need that. Down the road, all of a sudden kids are grown. It's like, that might have been a good idea.
Right.
That might have helped us not to be kind of as disconnected as we are now. And then having to like really kind of do some, salvation work, restoration of things that were broken. And it wasn't terrible. I mean, it wasn't anything like nobody's doing anything really bad. It was just like
it happens.
Connected.
I was just talking to some of my friends. So we're going to celebrate 21 years of marriage. Yeah. And I feel like, you have the roller coaster times. And my friend Jeannie calls it like a cycle. You get the bad times and then you cycle around the good times. But then there's something happens when you are married this long. And I was just talking to a few of our mutual friends. They were saying that it's like, you deal with your kids launching out, you have teenagers, then you are menopause, which is like a whole other thing. And then you have, all this stuff going on. And it's almost like you've morphed into someone else. And so has your spouse. Yeah. And it's almost like now we were joking how the husbands can't handle us having more of a voice now. Cause it's like, where did this come from? And it's like, well, either two things happen. One, the kids aren't here, so you can hear me now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you can actually hear what I'm saying. Or number two, it's like, well, we're tired. We've been serving, sewing. And now it's like, we need a little bit about like, it's about us right now, and it's kind of interesting how it happens in that 20 to 25 year mark. And, and then it's the comfortability and almost maybe even taking it for granted, where some of those renewal of the marriage conferences, it's like just like you get those boosts, shots of like being at homeschool conference or a parenting thing. It can happen in your marriage too. Like, you're like, oh yeah, that's why I appreciate you, or that's why you're so attractive, or, like.
I mean, for me, and I felt like God was convicting me of some attitudes, some things that I was like being bitter about, expecting. Yes. Why aren't you doing this? If you really cared, you'd do that. Right. You'd make more of an effort. It's like, okay, this is not all, this is like here. Right. Okay. You start making the effort. You start. And I really had to go back to kind of, what were the things when we were first married? The things I loved about you. What did you love about me? I've told him this before. In the middle of all this, I saw an idea on the internet that I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this for, I think it was Valentine's Day or something. And it was writing out a list of 52 things I love about you on a deck of cards. Right. Wow. Making a little, like just putting it together with a ring. To make a list of 52 things. Oh my goodness. That was hard. Because I'm like, I have to come up with 52 things. And it was a great exercise because I had to really dig to like, okay, what do I love about this man that I've been married to for now 35 years? We actually just had 41. Oh. So we're 41 years now. But what do I love about him? Besides a couple of the obvious came quick, and I was like, okay, now I'm at 10. I got 40 to go, right. For 2. And
you're like, where are all those words now?
But I did. I came up with a list, and it felt good that I was very like, oh wow, like, oh wow.
Then you're like, I chose good.
Like, yeah. But it was a good exercise for me to have to like stop and go, okay, forget the things that I'm annoyed about. And like, what do I love about him? Like, what is he really, what are his great qualities, you know, and about being a dad and a husband and a provider, you know, just lots of different things, and not make it the same thing I was just saying in 5 different ways, you know, over and over. But, you know, things are great now.
Right. But we do go through those circles and stuff. And
as homeschoolers, it's very easy to make everything be about your kids, right? Because, you know, your focus is on them and raising them, not only as parents, but now as educators. And so it's very easy to make everything kind of, like I said, we'd go out and we'd be talking about our schedule and who's, you know, what the kids are doing and stuff, instead of
you and
our relationship and how we're doing, and you know what, because it's like, well, that, you know, we're fine, like, so
so you would prioritize your marriage in very practical ways.
Prioritize marriage more.
Anything else you would implement? Or
well, and then a little bit, one of the other things you had mentioned was health, and I think my own health a little more, where things like exercise, which I would do from time to time, but then I'd get busy and like, oh, don't have time for that now. And the older you get, the harder it gets.
Amen.
And the older you get, like I've had now, you know, 2 knee replacement surgeries, and I'm probably looking at a hip replacement coming up. I don't know that I could have done things. I might have been able to do things if I had, you know, earlier, to prolong not having, it's also some genetic stuff to this, but, you know, my own exercise routines or things weren't a priority. But when I would stop, like I would do a class for a while, or I'd go walking, and I'd do it for a while, but then I'd stop because, it's cold out, or it's, you know, but then it's harder to start again. Then I'd be like, well, why did I stop? You know, because now it's so much harder to start again, you know, and, but just kind of, your health is something that, I mean, that's, you need to have a strong, healthy body to carry out what we're doing, you know. And, you know, there's other things that we can't always control, but the things we can control, I mean, I think I would have maybe started taking vitamins earlier. I mean, and there was also a lack of knowledge. And I know so much more now. I've had time to research more things.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that 25 years ago we thought were healthy that now we know are not.
Right, yeah.
Things that we were eating or doing, you know, so things that we thought we were doing right, we really weren't doing right. I'm more aware now of toxins, and I'm more aware of, you know, poisons in our food and in our...
Right, eggs are great.
You know, all these things.
Butter's great, yeah.
So some of that is just like, you know, you can't help because it's you only know what you know.
Right.
I think as moms, we put ourselves at the bottom of the totem pole, right?
Yes.
And
I mean,
who gets, you know, I mean, you know, I get the last scoop of whatever's in the pot, you know, because everybody else is hungry, and, you know, I mean,
so that's
that
exactly
kind of
what I'm talking about. Like, you get to that 20-year mark of marriage, and you've had all this stuff going on with you, and you're finally like, I don't want the burnt toast anymore. I don't want, you know, I want to be able to sleep and exercise, and I'm like, because you start feeling it in your body, you know, and then part of wanting to feel good and look good, even for your husband, like plays into your health role, and then you're just like, okay, this is a vicious cycle. Why didn't I take care of this when I was younger?
Because,
you know,
and you mentioned menopause hits, and that is a thing. I mean, that is not fun, and like your body changes, and all of a sudden things are like, you can't drop that 10 pounds or 20 pounds, you know, because it just is, there's just things that change as you get older, and, you know, having a stronger, but I've always enjoyed fitness and exercise, but didn't really practice it much. So I think I might have wished I could have maybe prioritized that, or done something that, so this is another area that we didn't choose. My kids did sports. I sat in the bleachers. It might have been nice to have something that we all did. Right. You know, maybe tennis or taekwondo. I know the families do that. The whole family does taekwondo, or the whole family does something. I don't know. Or maybe, you know, bike riding or something, but we didn't really have anything like that we all did together. Right. My husband was a coach, so he was at the gym, but
Right, and it's hard when you're...
I'm doing the videotaping. That's what.
Right. So you're like working there and you're cheering them on, and it's not like if you're doing basketball, it's not like you can go running around.
I'm not running up and down the court.
Yeah, because I have seen some soccer moms will use that time to like, I'll just run, but that's a lot easier in that kind of sport.
At a soccer field, there's more.
But what you're talking like hockey and all this other stuff.
No basketball courts and baseball. Well, volleyball courts is not a lot of opportunity.
And then you can't just like drop them off either, so that's kind of a thing. So I definitely think that those are really good priorities that seem very like I don't want to say basic, but it's so easy to let them slip through the cracks to have your marriage and your health.
I didn't have a lot of people telling me you should do that. I mean, would I have listened? I don't know.
Right.
But
now like, hey, young moms, this is what I would prioritize for yourself, because it is important.
And because as you get older, you'll start going, oh, I wish I did.
Right.
So
and I think that's awesome that you don't regret anything with your kids, but
when it comes to about me,
because it's so easy to be.
I don't regret, and like I said, maybe little things I would change, but I don't regret any of those things and the way that we did homeschooling, or the things that the things that we chose were all things I would do again.
Awesome. So, how do you continue to feel active and useful for the kingdom of God? And did you ever deal with identity crisis transitioning from?
Yes.
Okay.
No. Well, I don't know if identity crisis, but empty nest hit hard. Because, whatever, it was 23 years of homeschooling.
Right.
From, oldest to youngest. And so, like I said, that was my career. So when my youngest graduated and went to college, and there was nobody left home, not only was I was grieving the loss of my career and the end of my active mothering, right? No children left in the house, and knowing that was not going to come back, right? Even if they come back after college for a little bit, or they're adults now, it's a whole different thing. No more picking out curriculum, lesson planning, no more going, having, like I said, I grieved his whole senior year. I was a mess, the last first day of school and the last, basketball season of all my kids, the last graduation ceremony, all the lasts. So, I didn't know what was next for me. I was fortunate that I didn't have to re-enter the workforce. I have no idea what I would have done. I didn't have a career to return to. My career had been raising my children. Before children, I was pretty much just out of college and, had done a few little things, but not. So I kind of, I was still active in the homeschool group for a couple of years, still mentoring, taught a couple of classes with my friends' kids, homeschool classes. And then I also kind of, this was when my youngest two were still at home, but as they were teenagers now, and I was less involved in the day-to-day of homeschooling because they were taking classes outside, and I only was teaching maybe one or two things. I pulled my art stuff back out that had been in storage for years, because it was all, I had been an art major in school and years ago, and I had a lot of things that I had packed away for someday I'll get these out again. Right. And I was like, oh, I can start pulling this stuff out and dabbling, and sort of rediscovered some of my art things that I enjoyed doing. But then, God is faithful. And bit by bit, he started revealing sort of a path and little things that would just kind of come up. Like my daughter started working at a refugee ministry in Raleigh. And so I started to volunteer. So 2 mornings a week, I still do this. So I've been doing it for 7 or 8 years now. 2 mornings a week, I volunteer as a preschool teacher, with a refugee ministry. It's great. Little 3 and 4 year olds. It's just a couple hours, just two mornings a week. And then I started to get involved in a women's ministry at church. That had started.
That's an awesome fit for you.
For older. Yeah. I mean, I didn't know it because I really had not spent much time when my kids were young. I couldn't really get involved in church ministries because I didn't have time. I used to tell other moms too, whenever you say yes to one thing, you're having to say no to something else, and to be careful of how you're dividing up your time, what your focus is supposed to be in your season. Right. And in the season of raising my kids, I knew most of the things that I wanted to say yes to were going to be things that were built around, what we were trying to do, raising them. So I wasn't as involved outside ministry kind of things. But now that I didn't have the homeschooling part anymore, a ministry at church for older women 50 and older, I started to get involved in, and then I got into leadership with that, and that's become a very big part of what I do now. I mean, it's a much bigger thing, helping to lead that group. And so there's that, and then just, some mentoring, both of homeschool moms. I still do a little bit, but just younger moms in church, also as a Titus II kind of ministry. So I still am busy, and like my mom is here visiting for 3 months. She lives up in New England, but she comes down now for the winter months, and
that's nice.
I've got her, kind of, so I take her places and do things, get to spend some good quality time with her parts of the year, because we've always lived far away. From the time we got married, we moved far away and have lived,
and it's a lot harder to host people, especially for a long extended time, even though it's your parent, it's like, you're in the grind.
I now have a guest room, which I didn't have. It's the boys' room is now the guest room, right? So I have a place for her. So there is, that kind of, what am I doing in my retirement kind of thing. God has provided things that I didn't know were going to be coming up, that were going to be things that I wanted to be part of. But that's, and just kind of being available for things that come up is nice. We can, my husband, of course, then COVID came and my husband started working from home. That was a fun thing.
So that was another transition.
That was a fun thing, yeah. It took a few months to he was invading my space, because this is my space. But kind of got used to having him around. And then he's back in the office, but just a couple days a week, and he's still home part. So he's home a lot more than he ever was in our early years of marriage, which is a good thing, because he was more of a distraction on days, when I was trying to homeschool. If he was off, we had to kind of...
It's like, Dad's home.
Dad, yeah.
That means we're having fun, right?
Oh, yeah. And he'd be like, well, come on, you guys want to... No, they can't. We're doing that.
Yeah.
But...
and now it kind of feels probably like almost like a seasoned newlywed stage, right? Because it's like you guys are just, it's the house to yourselves, kind of like,
Except my mom's there now, but yeah, but when she's not. But yes, it is. It's nice. I've adjusted now. It's been a few years. I've kind of gotten over. I still love when everybody comes home. I still love to have the whole family together and the house full. And, but I'm okay with just the two of us too.
Right.
That's kind of nice. So there's good things that come.
Yeah.
In the later years. And you can enjoy
a death of one season, but the birth of a new one.
Yeah. And the old grandkid thing, that was a good thing. That's awesome.
Yes, that's
just
awesome.
What everybody said. I had to wait a few years. They were married for about 6 years before they had kids. Everybody's waiting longer these days, it seems.
They are, yeah.
But I have a 4-year-old and 9-month-old grandsons, and they're
And you get to
awesome.
Do, that's another thing too. It's like grandparents are having like a generational influence too, even academically. So like you get to play and have fun with them as well.
Yeah, I take it very seriously that I do have an opportunity to be an influence as a grandparent, not as a parent.
Yes.
And I'm really grateful. I mean, my daughter-in-law was also homeschooled. She has that same mindset. she's very engaged with the boys, and loves being a mom, and does stuff with them all the time. And I don't want to step in,
right?
But I'm like, anything you want me to do, I'll do. But he's coming with me to the preschool one morning a week, and then we have a date afterwards. We go out for lunch or go to the park or do things. So, it's fun.
That is sweet.
It's fun.
Very cool. So, talking about the Titus II woman, I wanted to ask, as a seasoned wife, mother, and retired homeschool mom, you know and have been the Titus II example. Mentorship is taught and seen throughout all of Scripture. Yet we see so many older women not being seen, heard, or feeling shut out or shut down. And this happens often with moms who have a wide range of kids, kind of like you and I both did, or still do.
Yeah, right.
So she may be older and more experienced and have a 20-year-old down to, or 20 plus, and have a 7 or 8-year-old or even younger sometimes. But she doesn't feel welcome in today's circles. Why do you think this is? And how can this change? And what do the younger women need to do? And even the older women need to do? Like, where can we meet to have that intersect?
I don't know. I mean, it's, I know that that's a real thing. People experience that. I have experienced it, but I also would caution that I don't know that it's widespread. I think when it happens and you feel that rejection as an older, mom, more experienced, and aren't received well by somebody or by a group, you back off and you are hesitant to put yourself out there again with anybody else. And I kind of have seen that there are a lot of younger moms who are receptive and want to have input from older women who've been there, done that, to kind of give like what we had. I mean, my friends, as a homeschool mom, I had, in our early years, there was a mom in our group who was homeschooling her granddaughter. So she was almost my mom's age, as well as younger ones, and I have friends who are in their 30s or my kids' ages, now, and I have older friends. I think there's a lot of value. And like you said, Scripture talks about older women and younger women, older women pouring into spiritually younger women especially. And so it's kind of for both, like for younger women to just understand. I do think there's a lot of them who want that, but maybe don't know how to
get that or
to ask for. Or I know it's you really just have to build a friendship before. It's like with anything, before you can be vulnerable with somebody, or to not feel like someone's criticizing you or trying to change, like, oh, you're doing that wrong, you should be doing it this way.
Right.
If you have a friend who's like, you know what, when I was doing that, this is what worked for me, it comes,
right.
a lot.
Because, we talk a lot about
better.
discipleship. We talk a lot about mentorship.
Yeah.
And then we have gaping holes in the church. And then even in our homeschool community, it's hard to get, the older people are getting burnt out. And then, because we're just keep doing it. And then, or we've stepped back, and then you see stuff fall away and don't come back. And then you have these younger ones that kind of are wanting to start, but, and then others who just don't step up. Like, what is missing? What can we do to connect the links, you think?
It's so hard because just the way we live today is so disconnected. Mm-hmm. We're disconnected in churches. We're disconnected in our neighborhoods. We're disconnected in our homeschool groups because we just kind of pop in and pop out. And we don't ever really get, we don't spend a lot of time together, just kind of doing things together.
Right.
And if that's what I kind of mean about you don't have a relationship in order to speak into somebody's life or to feel like you can receive from somebody. I'm not going to receive this great from a stranger. Mm-hmm. But if I know you care about me, then I'm going to receive that in a whole different way.
Right.
So somehow finding ways to just to just make connections. And, like you were talking about our regular monthly meetings that we used to have. I think that's one of those purposes. We came, and because you saw these people every month, even if you weren't like doing other activities with them, it's like,
we connected last
we're connected.
month,
We sat at the same table.
Or I might have saw you at that field trip, and now I know you because of
We have another chance to talk and to sort of share. And after a few, like, now I remember your family and your kids, and start talking about things. So you need to have some consistency. And I know even like right now in church, we're finding we started to do just some socials as Titus 2 relationship building, before you can even start talking about mentoring, because I don't think mentoring works well. I think a lot of times you try to do these mentoring programs where it's like, your kids are this age, your kids are this age, like you're that she's going to be your mentor. Well, you're still strangers, you're still. That doesn't often work well unless the two people just kind of click,
right,
and start like, okay, we think alike, we like each other,
right.
But just having two people like, I'm older, you're younger, therefore I'll be your mentor.
Right.
It's not really how it works, and that's not how discipleship works in the Bible either. It's not just there's a relationship of living life. So how to find out how do you do that is the challenge, right? How do you make time? So you kind of have to have people willing to make sacrifice of time to get to know each other, to want that relationship as a mentor and a mentee.
And then I guess also create the atmosphere, really, for it. Like, so I guess you go to a larger church, right? Yeah. And so to break it down, you're doing the
it has to be some opportunities, because we're in a big church, and and that's where I think things like social media. We got Facebook groups where everybody's asking their questions and stuff, but there's no face, there's no interaction. This is just I want advice about this, and everybody's throwing their ideas at them, and then they're like, well, I'll pick something. I don't know.
Right.
It's not, but
it's almost like you need that in person, get that atmosphere going, and then let people meet each other, and then see how they kind of click. And I
think the mentoring will happen best when you have a community that you've built where you have some relationship going. So I don't know how else to kind of make that. It's kind of like with your kid, you can't make it happen, right?
Right.
So, but that's, if you want it, like if you want to be a mentor to somebody, or if you want a mentor, you need to find a way to start spending time with people.
And do you feel like there's a certain qualification for a mentor?
None except for a willingness to share, because our experiences are, we're sharing our experiences, and it might be that I can share the things that I think worked well for me, but also I can share the things that I didn't do well.
Right.
Like, oh, you might not want to do this. I did that, didn't work out so well.
Right.
Like, I talk about marriage, like, oh, I wish I had spent more time with my husband. That would have been I would suggest maybe that would be something to prioritize,
right?
Because I saw that it would have been better if I had, So it comes from both sides of having done, having good experiences with something, or seeing where you lacked, that you can share that with somebody else. And I don't think a mentor is someone who tries to make somebody like them. Like, it's not like, oh, you should be doing this like I did it.
Right.
But
it's kind of just edifying and pushing them up,
encouraging them in the way, in the path that God's leading on them, and maybe seeing parallels, things that you can, you see where your experience or your knowledge, because you're older and wiser. I think we have to realize that we do have wisdom as we get older.
Yeah.
We might think, well, I messed that all up, but you've gained something from that, and that God can use that in somebody else's life. I think that for a lot of people, they just don't believe that they have anything to offer as older women, or the younger women maybe don't understand or believe that they have anything to learn.
Right. So it's almost that limited mindset.
A mindset.
Like, I'm good. I got my stuff.
Yeah.
And then you got the other side that's kind of like, well, I guess you don't want to hear from me.
Yeah.
You know? And then I guess something in that setting where you hear from lots of women and, you know, and that was one cool thing about like the testimonials or using moms from within the community. It's like you found something to connect with and then you try to talk to them afterwards or something.
Right.
And so I guess we have to create an atmosphere for building, you know, relationship and then putting ourselves out there and seeing how we click and jive. I know for years for our meetings, I was a table host and sometimes I would connect different people out there or I got connected and that's how they got to know me. Yeah. And so I do think we do have to, you know, be encouraged in that way. So would you say that social media in a way has, you know, it shows statistically that we're actually more fake than we are real. Mm-hmm. We, you know, put things up and then yet we really feel depressed and sad. And then when we look at other people's lives, we're more depressed and sad. And then we're not actually as relational as we used to be. You know, people aren't camping as much or people aren't, you know, being in each other's homes and you know, we used to have a hospitality cabinet so that when anybody was over or we wanted to invite everybody over, you know, it's like if you've got chips and salsa and some water and you know, maybe chicken nuggets in the freezer, you have something, you know, to give them, you know, mini tacos or whatever. And it's like what we've culturally, a lot of people around the world still do that, you know, always have a cup of tea ready or something. Oh yeah. But like here, you do think that maybe one of the big gap from the past to the present and one of those roots that we've probably lost is just the in-person initiative of relationship.
I think so. And I think it's, you know, it's something to encourage and be a voice of trying to, how do we reclaim that? Like, how do we, because I do think you started to say about social media, and I do think it has taken the place in a lot of situations for in-person connection because it's just an information source. Right. Like I just need information. Well, it's only as good as, you know, you don't know anything about where that information's coming from. How good is it, you know? Right. But versus the time to get to know and invest in somebody.
And then it's always like, oh, well, so-and-so is using that or so-and-so is using this or that. Yeah. And then you're like spend all over the place, you know, and then where you can have people, you can really talk to them about like, have you used this? Has it worked for you in this situation, that situation? They can help even like weed stuff out, you know, like you don't really need this or that. And, you know, or our kids, you know, it's so different when they hang out with people in person than they do when they're constantly on the screen. Yeah. And I know I've had to tell my kids, like, you know, what you would say on a screen is sometimes more bolder than what you would say to their face. Yeah. So make sure that you're talking to them like anything you would say on a screen, you're saying to their face, you know, and I think that does play a role in it too. Like it's such a blessing because we can get to classes, we can do live streams, we get platforms like this to
people
grow.
Who are far away, you can sort of keep touch, but
but you need the in-person real people. Yeah.
I mean, some of my, you know, like again, before we had all of this and we did spend time, you know, when I would see people in the homeschool group at meetings and then again at the park day and then again at, you know, whatever band or whatever. And those moms, you know, the kids were getting to know each other, but us moms were getting to know each other because we would sit and talk and share and sit outside literally for hours after the meetings or whatever. But like some of my best friends in the world are still my homeschool mom friends. And there's a few, you know, there's 4 of us who are on a text group and a Marco Polo that we now live all over the country. Wow. But every week we're talking and these are we're like,
so that's the blessing of technology.
These are women that I met because we were homeschooling together. Not together, we were in the same homeschool group. We connected. We did things together, and you know, those are my.
And that's one of the questions I was going to ask is like, do you find that it was, I guess it's pretty easy for you to have kept your friendships from when you were in the thick of it. Yeah. And then you also answered it that now with your church and your new leadership role, you're meeting younger women and older and you
so
have
I have
friends.
A new group of friends too, but again, I have my
lifelong friends.
My lifelong friends that'll always be my, I'll always care about them and their families, and we'll always be touching base.
So in a nutshell, if you could say the old generation or older generation mindset was like this younger generation's mindset is more like this, and then how would you say let's bridge the two together?
As homeschoolers, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, even as, if you want to say parents.
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard to characterize a whole generation, because there was, there were people in my generation also who were different, had a different way of doing things than I did. So, but I do think that some of the things like we just talked about of in-person relationships are still the core of, of friendships. It makes it more satisfying, and in the long run, our kids want to have friendships with people. We need to have friendships with people that care about you outside of homeschooling. Even like, my car broke down, I can call Danette, and I know she's gonna she'll get her husband to come pick me up or whatever. There's people in my life that they're really my friends, and we just need to have people that we know care about if we're sick, if we have, whatever it is. And this happens to be our community. This homeschool world is a lot of our life, and then we might have a church, it might cross over into our church family. But it's the same, dynamic. And I think we miss out. And I think maybe because the younger generation has so much access to so many different
they can I can Google this.
I can Google it. I can check this. I'm going to this activity with a whole different circle of people that I'm doing this over here with and this over here. So there's not a lot of where I tended to have the same several people would show up multiple places. And I think maybe that's missing now. There's less chance that might happen because they're not just doing things in a support group. They may be in this support group for this, and then they're in this co-op over here, and then this club over here, and then this thing over here. So they're really torn between lots of different groups of people and not really building into one of them, So that might be part of where things tend to be more scattered and more, less unified. Today, it's a bigger community. Like we talked about it being more diverse. So that's going to happen also. But you have to find your people.
Mm-hmm. Especially when it is more diverse, which is a great thing.
Yeah.
But then also, if you're looking for an actual Bible-believing homeschool support group, a statement of faith has to be signed.
We were very deliberate when we started the support group that we wanted it to be a Christian group for that reason, that we wanted there to be that common faith. Mm-hmm. That even if we were using different methods of homeschooling and choosing different curriculums and had different philosophies of, classical versus unschooling versus Charlotte Mason and whatever it might be, that we had that common bond of faith that we all, and that we could pray for each other, and that we could, be comfortable knowing that, there's going to be devotions, and we're going to be talking about God as part of our lives. It's not separate. Right. Church isn't just something you do on, it's not just God is in church on Sunday and everything else is separate. It's all part of the same thing. It's just our lives are, as Christians, involve God in everything. So even there was, even 30 years ago, there was that, people who suggested, well, you're leaving people out. You're excluding people who need that support. Yes. And I hope that they have a way of connecting with like-minded people also. Right. But this is just so important to us, that we have a group of people that we can be. We don't have to hide or feel like we can't.
Mm-hmm. We don't want to offend. We don't want to go down.
That we can't pray in front of them or be offensive because they don't believe the same things. we want it to be a place where everyone's comfortable expressing that part, because it's such a big
part of who we
are.
Yeah.
And why we're doing the things we're doing and making the choices we're making. So, that's, I think that may be getting diluted. And,
and then it's kind of scaring off people like me and the older people who are kind of like, well, I'm all about Jesus, because this generation in general, like, has a lordship issue. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it's kind of like, well, I want to link arms with another fellow Christian, but if you don't actually believe that you have to obey Christ and his word, or you want to water it down, or you don't want to be offensive, it's like, Jesus said, I came to bring a sword. Like, and it's like, he will divide, because he's either master or he's not, and I mean, that might be hard, but it's truth, and we should have a place of refuge with other like-minded believers,
I think part of the challenge for parents today, even more so than when I started, although it was probably true then, but I didn't feel it as much as I do now, is how deliberate we have to be. We can't be casual Christians, right? We can't expect our community to support, the values that we have in our families, so we can, be casual about it because we're surrounded by it.
Right.
It's just going to be part of our upbringing. It's not that way.
Yeah.
What's coming from the outside of our families is often the exact opposite of what we're trying to teach our children, that God is real, that, that he has specific things that he's called us to, and to do and to not do. And those things are very countercultural, right? They're not accepted in the broader society. So we have to be very deliberate, or we lose the next generation, right? Again, there's no guarantee by teaching them that they're going to accept the things that we believe, but that's our job.
Yeah.
Right? To teach our children and to pass on truth to the next generation. And it is, I think, that because it's different than how we grew up, because the world is different.
Exactly.
Than it was when we were growing up.
And do you think it's important, I like that you use the word deliberate, that we have to be deliberate. Do you think that it even requires now that we talk and have certain conversations with our kids so much younger than we did even, 10 years ago,
Yeah. I think you have to start early, and
because the world's waiting at the door.
And there's things that, I do think that sheltering our children is something we are absolutely supposed to do when they're little, that's part of having, a family to protect, part of a parent's job to protect their children from things they're not ready for. But at the same time, as they mature, we have to be willing to introduce things to them that we might not be comfortable with, but so that but always from the position of, this is what this is, and this is what God says, so that they can start to process things through that lens, that Christian worldview, right?
Yes.
But you can't protect them completely from what the world is doing and saying at a point, because they have to live in the world.
Right. And they have to be equipped.
So equipping, and that's the hard thing, right? Because it's
equipping, that training.
And we don't know, again, because this is new to a lot of us too. I mean, a lot of this is new to us. It's like, how do we do that?
Yeah. We never had to worry about more than two genders. It's like, okay, our big thing back in the day was creation versus evolution. You know what I mean? Like, that was like a big thing. But now it's like, simple. What is marriage? What is gender? Like, all those things. And we don't want to have those conversations. But it is everywhere.
It
You
is.
can't even check out at the line without, something being obvious. And, and it's in books. And now they're coming after us in children's books. So it's like we have to equip them so much with the truth. And I'm thankful that we have so many good organizations and, the Bible truth out there. And it's so accessible. And it's just sad that we, they say now that like less than 50% of Christians actually read their Bible more than like twice a year or something like that. And it's like, wow, like people are just not reading the Bible when you can just like hear it as you get ready in the morning now. Like, it's so accessible, but yet we're so ignorant of it.
That's, I think, getting back to some of the things that I know that we probably as a family, because Mark and I didn't grow up as, we grew up in a Catholic church when we were young, both of us, and then, didn't come to salvation until we were adults. And, but some of like the just, practices of daily Bible, things that I wish we had done with our kids when they were young, but we just didn't, we were still learning it, right? But the daily practices of teaching them to read the Bible and how to study it. I mean, I remember doing some Bible studies with my kids. I always included, reading and with our like couch time in the morning, but I would probably be more deliberate in those areas to actually disciple them in how to study the Bible, in developing a good prayer life, in just the habits of the Christian life, reading the Bible together after supper or whatever, those kind of family devotion kind of things that I think just kind of create that culture in your family. This is who we are. We are a Christian family, and these are the things that we do in our family. And everybody's welcome in. Like you can bring your friends over. We'll do this together, right? They can be part of this, but this is how we live. And I think that
makes the biggest change. And I think the biggest influence to keeping your kids knowing the truth, exposing them to the truth, and keeping them grounded, and keeps your family grounded and knitted together. What's that saying? You pray together, you stay together, you stand on God's word. And it's so good that you say that that was one thing you majorly will implement today, because and be deliberate about it, because not only do we have to fight the culture, but we have so many compromising Christians, or if it even is a thing, that there is leftist Christians, which is kind of like a weird word term. But it's like, because you may have to even tell your friends.
Pastors and churches that aren't.
And you have to be
teaching
like,
truth.
No, this is what God's word says. This is our authority that we submit ourselves under, not because that person has a title in a mega church or, this or that. And it's, I think that's highly encouraging to hear, no matter what stage of parenthood or homeschooling you're in.
There's a quote, and I wrote it down, but I read it recently, and I was like, this is for parents today, and it's never be sorry for raising dragon slayers during a time when there are actually dragons.
Amen. Oh, that's good.
Like, I love that, because I think, it followed, I saw that it followed someone like posting and said, I felt like I needed to apologize to my wife that, or not apologize. It was saying, I'm sorry it's that we're raising our kids in a time when it's so hard, to raise them as Christians. This is so hard. And then that quote came up. It's like, never be sorry for raising dragon slayers. It's like, that's what we have to think. That's a mindset I don't think I had when my kids were young. I have that for my grandchildren. It's like, we're raising them to be dragon slayers. Because they have to be bold, strong, courageous. No matter what God calls them to do in life. We're living in Babylon, right? We're not living in surrounded by like-minded believers. We're living in Babylon, where you have to be bold and know, you have to know your faith.
You have to be the Daniel.
Be able to be Daniel. To be Daniel. And again, I liked that, that dragon slayers in a time when there are actually dragons. There are things out there that have to be fought against. We can't just sit back as Christians and say, I'm just waiting for Jesus to come back. I can't, I think as long as we have breath, we're supposed to be pushing the kingdom forward.
Amen.
And you know. So even now as a retired, you know, I don't have children to pour into, but I still have a responsibility in my area of influence, you know,
Yes.
where the people that I'm in contact with of speaking truth and being, you know, an example and loving people and, you know, standing up for what is right.
Right.
And true. And there is right and there is truth.
That's right. Amen to that.
So,
Awesome.
yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with
Oh,
our
boy.
audience today?
You know, I think it's worth it. I mean, I say this all the time, homeschooling is the hardest thing I ever did. I mean, taking on that responsibility is a huge weight. It's a responsibility. It's hard work. I cried more, you know, in the bathroom with the door locked because I thought I was ruining my kids for this or that or the other thing when things didn't go well. I doubted myself a lot. I do feel grateful that God gave me the discernment to be able to see when this, you know, I kind of have that vision of the red, like the devil talking in my ear over here. Like, that's not his voice. And I feel so much more Pentecostal now than I ever did in my life. Like, I'm praying against Satan all the time. Like, get out of my ear. You know, that's who that doubt that's telling me that I'm not good enough. No, you don't have anything to say. No, you might be wrong about that. Okay, wait a minute. And I can go and say, God, where's the truth here? And find it. And nope, I'm standing on that. And so just being brave. And I said, it's the hardest thing I ever did. It's the most worthwhile thing I ever did. I mean, both as, you know, just as a parent and pouring into your kids, you know, what is more important? You know, I grew up in the feminist time of, you know,
Yes.
having a career and breaking the glass ceilings. And, you know, I went to college and was supposed to have and I always knew I wanted to be a mom. And I always knew when I was a mom, that was going to be my priority. So even the what I was hearing was, you're more than that. I was like, I don't. And even when I wasn't really a Christian or I didn't really know God's word, I still felt that was more important. And when I started to get into God's word, and yes, this is, you know, a career is a good thing, and God might call some people to careers that he has for a purpose for them. But if you have a family, that has to be, there's nothing more important than pouring into your children and raising them to love God and serve God and helping prepare them for the future. So whatever choices you make to do that, everybody's not going to make the same choices and be in the same position, but it's worth sacrifice. It's worth the time. It's worth the effort and the tears.
Right.
You know, and none of us are perfect. And I know I wasn't perfect. And I know that, you know, but my prayer often was, God, just give grace over the areas that I'm falling short. I always felt like I pray that he knew my heart, that was to, you know, to obey and to do the best I could, and that he would just give grace over any of the areas. And, you know, they're doing okay. they're doing fine. And I think my kids appreciate that they were homeschooled, which is nice now.
You're right.
You know, you don't know, but
And they're all successful.
they're doing
Range.
great. They're doing a wide range of things. I mean, they're great people. I love this. I always say it's in spite of me. It's not because I did anything. Like they're doing things that I would never do.
I know. Isn't it great when they inspire
wow.
you and then they're your friend?
Yeah.
You know, it's like
It's
you can have
gosh,
friends.
you're such a cool person. Like,
Yes.
I love that. And yeah. And they, you know, but they see value in having had a great childhood. That's one thing my son with the 2 little boys, he's like, I want my boys to have like a childhood like I had, because we had the freedom, like our days were short, you know, school wise, like we could do the things in a shorter amount of time. They weren't away from home. He spent hours in the woods out in the creek, you know, building forts and all that boy stuff that he loved to do, and riding bikes around the neighborhood, and you know, going places where we had play dates with friends and stuff. But there was, you know, they were spared for the most part from peer pressure and bullying and things like that. And I think they realized that as they got older and started to make friends with other kids, like through church, and then especially when they got to college, and like hearing about their experiences, those people's experiences growing up were like so different from theirs. I'm like, wow, like I really had a good childhood. So that kind of reinforced for me that this was, you know, something that they could appreciate, that was different from. And that they also liked coming home, which a lot of their friends didn't like going home.
Yes.
Or spending time with their siblings or whatever. Like that's pretty unique, you know. They realized that wasn't true of everybody.
Right.
You know. So.
And it's not. And it's such a blessing to know, like, you know, you have children who want to homeschool their children. Yeah. You have children who enjoy coming home. You have children who love each other and love hanging out with each other outside of you and love hanging out with you. Yeah. And then you have, you know, a child who's not walking with the Lord, but he's still loved and accepted, and there's influence, and he'll hear what you say, and you know the Lord is hearing your prayers,
and God is still at work, and he's not done with him yet.
Exactly. So. And you know,
and academically, you know, even though like I was an eclectic homeschooler, I was not I would not say I was like a super disciplined, I didn't grade, and you know, it was like we, you know, covered lots of subjects, but did a lot of unit studies and things like that. And but I was always very conscious of helping my kids develop the tools to learn. And when they went to college, that was one of the things that they would come back and say, you know, that they knew how to be self-starters. I remember one time my daughter called from she was at App State, and she called and said, I want to thank you. I go, okay. Wow. You know, she said, for teaching me how to do things myself. She said, because she had just come from a biology lab, and she said that, you know, the professor had passed out the instructions. They were in lab groups, and then said, okay, go. And everybody sort of sat around like, well, what are we supposed to do now? Right. And she said she looked down at the thing he'd handed out, and it said, he goes, well, step 1 says, and she read it, like, go get this, da, da, da. And everybody stood up and went and got the stuff and came back and looked at her like, what's next? And she's like, I just read the sheet, Mom. I just read the directions. And then, but they were all like, we don't know what to do until somebody tells us what to do. And that was just so different, because her experience was, I gave them the books, I gave them the stuff. And
right. There, and then you do a lot
come talk to me if you have a question or if you need help with something. But in general, you're teaching yourself. Right.
Especially with in those older grades, you know.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
And then also,
high
too,
school.
like life skills. Like there's so many kids who have gone to college, and they say they didn't know how to do laundry, they didn't know how to cook, they didn't know how to like take their car to an auto mechanic. And I'm like, this is sad. But you think about 7-8 hours, and then if they at school, and then if they happen to have a job or they're just doing their homework or sports, it's like they don't really get that unless you know.
We started our day with life skills. We started our day with cleaning the house every morning, and everybody had chores that they did, and we rotated through people. And my youngest, he kind of laughs because he right now he lives in a house with 2 other guys. It was 3. One of them got married. 2 other guys, and he's like, Mom, he goes, I clean the bathrooms. This is my youngest. Now the baby of the family kind of tends to be and I was like, it wasn't very neat around. He goes, I clean the bathrooms because they get gross, and the other guys don't do anything. I'm like, well, I'm proud of you.
Yes.
He's like, can you believe it, Mom? I'm the one
I know.
in this house. He goes, I'm cleaning the bathrooms. He goes, I wash the kitchen floor.
Yeah,
I
it
do this.
amazes
I do that.
me.
Because he knows how. He knows how to do laundry. He knows how to cook. He knows how to do all the chores. And
Right.
just the other guys don't.
Because you have these kids that are young, and they have iPhones, and they know how to do all this stuff, and they play all these games, but it's like they don't know how to change out the laundry. They don't know how to start laundry. They can't do dishes. They don't know how to cook basic meals. It's like, that's sad.
Yeah.
And that's not the things that are going to last. And so a lot of homeschool college kids are so sought after because they are self-starters, and they do know how to show up on class on time. They know how to learn, and they're not just taught what to think, but how to think,
And, we talked about character. We talked about, because I know for my kids too, they're sought after both for that, but also like in the workplace, because they were taught to work hard. Mm-hmm. And they were taught, it was just an expectation we had at home. Mm-hmm. If you do something, you do it to the best of your ability. Yes. You do it as if you're doing it unto the Lord, but you do your best. Mm-hmm. Like, that's our expectation. It doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be, but you have to try your hardest.
Right.
In whatever it is, whether you're playing sports, whether you're washing the car, whether you're, making your bed, but you do your best.
Exactly.
Right? You don't do this half. And if it's halfway done, no, you can do that again.
Yeah, that's what I tell my kids.
But that was just
like,
the
are you signing off on this?
And so it's just so. And to us as parents, it was like, that didn't seem like that was anything special. That's just the way.
It is,
we were taught. But we've had people come back and say, your kids work so hard, like, from their employers or whatever. And it's like, well, you're supposed to, if you have a job, you do the best you can. They're like, well, that's not what normal, like, that's not what a lot of that's not what most people are like now. Mm-hmm. Like, they just do the bare minimum. I'm like, oh, that's sad.
Christians should be the excellence, And I tell my kids all the time that Bible verse where it's like, do you see a man skillful in his work? He'll stand before kings. It's like, he'll be the one that's chosen for the promotion, the one that's going somewhere because he has the skills. He's perfected it to be, someone who's like a master and compared to, it's like being a master craftsman, and that's your job, is to do that, whether it's the toilet or toast or the laundry, whatever it is,
and
algebra.
That reputation follows you, and that's something like we always other thing we always told our kids is like, you have a chance to make an impression, but that reputation is going to follow you because people talk.
Yes.
People are looking,
and a good
they're
name
watching,
is to be chosen rather than great riches.
And so, these are things that might not seem important, but ultimately it's going to help in life. And just I don't know. Again, this is just maybe generational stuff, but it just seems to be not the norm. But as homeschool parents, like, do that.
Yes.
Like, give your kids jobs at home. Mm-hmm. Expect them to do it well.
Yep.
Give you don't have to be yelling and screaming at them, but like, okay, well, that's not clean. So you can go back and do it again, and then we'll check it off because but you're not done until I've inspected it and I think it's done, right? So, but. And
that's what I've taught my kids. I'm like, you will get reviews or evaluations or inspections at work all the time. So I'm going to inspect your work. So I'm going to give you one more chance. Do you want to go check it? And so, and then there's times where I've been like, you're going to sign off on that? Like, your name is good with this work? And then they'll be like,
Like, if I put your name on that and said, this belongs to the so-and-so did that.
Are you happy with that work? Yeah. And I think sometimes that's a good... it's a good thing. It's character building.
Lesson. Yeah.
And it's just real life.
And then when they grow up, that goes with them. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that applies in real life too. Like you said, that's like, that applies in the workplace. Oh, that, and that, why are you going to get chosen over somebody else?
Exactly.
Maybe because you did a good job.
Yep. You put in that effort. So raising hard workers and building character, putting your marriage first, working out and putting your health, and just not operating out of fear, and enjoy it and realize the high calling that you do have, and savor the moment so that you have a life-giving home and one that continues to give life in the second and third generations.
Very good.
Awesome.
That you remembered all of that. But yeah, that's really in a nutshell, right?
Yeah, I am so encouraged by having you. I always love talking to you, and you have blessed my homeschool and my mindset a lot. And I think it's important to hear from the older voices that have paved the way and encouraged along the way. And I feel like I'm the one closer to your generation, but on the cap of I want you guys to come over here and see what it's like, on these pastures, because like you said, the social media and stuff has changed stuff, but real life connections and community is what matter. And don't be afraid to be a pioneer, to start something that, if it's missing or lacking, pioneer it up. The Lord will give you grace, and he'll bring you the people in the like-minded community that you need. That's
what's happened. And good things come from it. So
and put Jesus first, and don't be afraid to talk about him and be exclusive for his glory and the encouragement of fellow saints. Because oftentimes we have to remember, it says, do not grow weary in doing a good work. And then right after that verse, it says to take care of those in the household of faith first, and then others. So let's take care of each other first.
Well, that's that whole thing. You can't pour out of an empty cup, right? I mean, that's true individually, but also corporately, we need to be encouraging each other, and then we can, we're stronger as a group too. But and I'm encouraged. I see the gaps, but then every once in a while you see somebody's that person's got it. They have the vision, and then okay, so they're out here, and hopefully they'll spread some of that, vision to their peers, because, and part of it may just be, Nereida, that there's just so many more people now in the community that are homeschooling. You're going to get more people with different approaches and different mindsets. Not everybody's starting for the same reasons that we started. I call it sometimes tourists. There's a lot more tourist homeschoolers who it's kind of that kind of looks like a fun place to visit. We can go try that for a little bit. We'll do that for a little while, but now we're going to go over here. It's kind of trying out different things and not really committing. And, there's a lot more of that than there ever was before. Right. Just I'm going to homeschool for a year, or I'm going to homeschool I'm just going to try it for, but as soon as my child wants to do something else, I'm going to they get to choose where they go to school. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But, so there's not that investment or commitment.
Yeah, from a place of conviction. Yeah. And it's this is a call. Do you use that word? And that, I have to say that's a word that I don't hear much in today's circles. I'm doing this because I feel called. This is my mission. It's part
more
of my
of a reaction to a bad situation or a bad teacher, or my child isn't happy. Versus, that makes a difference, right?
It really does.
As a parent, on how you're going to approach it too.
Yeah. And I think that when you put, my husband always says that when you put skin in the game, when you have that level of commitment, then you have more expectations of of it reaping back to you, because you're actually committed, because you've put something out there. Sometimes I think that it's kind of bad to be I'm doing it for just a year. We're just going to do it and see how it goes. And it's but then you're not totally committed to that year. Let's see how it, and maybe sometimes people need that, just baby bites, but sometimes when you have that long-term vision, sometimes I think we forget the Proverbs say, without vision, the people perish. You're going to die, and your homeschool will die, or this or that, if you see a shorter end rather than a long haul journey. And that sometimes, multiple bad days or weeks or months doesn't overshadow the lasting commitment and legacy that is to come when you bunch up all of those years. There's always going to be more good than bad. You'll never regret.
The big picture, sometimes you need to back up. You need to back up and get yourself out of the middle of the trees to
Yes.
see the big picture. And that's what you really need to focus on, because the individual days can be rough.
Yes.
You know, and not go well, and everything's backwards, and, you know, why am I doing this? But when you look at the big overall, what's my big picture here? What's the goal? You know, that's where your focus kind
Yes.
of comes back. Like, I'm doing this for a bigger purpose than this. I just have to get through this patch of, you know, a rough year maybe, or a rough season. But those things come, you know.
Yes.
There's
And we got to remember the Lord of the harvest, like who will restore back what was lost and stolen. Like,
Yeah.
we had a rough couple of years from
Yeah.
2020 on
Yeah.
till today, and the Lord is still good. My kids are still learning. They're still, like, they've learned compassion. One got saved. Like, there's just, the Lord is still at work, and we have to, like, keep the, like, what, you know, like, we have to be the laborers willing, that even though we're few, you know. And then I know you can attest to this, and I can too, after graduating kids. It's like, that was too fast.
Yeah.
Where did that all go? You know, like,
It's so
what?
fast.
And then
Yeah.
now you're in a completely different stage of life. But it's, I had a friend one time tell me when my kids were really small, like, this is the time of your life where when you were little, you always looked to. And this is the time of life that, like, when you get my age, you'll always look back on.
Yeah.
She was like, you'll always, and I'm like, that stuck with me forever. And I'm like, I don't want to rush it, because the days can be really long. But, you know, like they say, the years are so short. It does fly by. And thank God we have him, who is, like, the keeper of our time and can redeem it when it's lost.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
But thank you so much for being here with me and
you're
sharing
welcome.
your testimony and just your experience. Like, it's always a blessing. I love speaking with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope, everyone, that this has been an encouragement and a blessing to you. I know it has been for me, hearing from Beth. And if you like this content and would like more of it, please subscribe, leave a review, and thank you so much. We'll see you next time.